The grimdark future of Warhammer 40K is not a setting that is traditionally known for its humor. Well, except for the orcs. Everything they do is hilarious. But for the most part, everything else is played super seriously, which makes those rare moments of humor in the books way funnier than they have any right to be by comparison. From a demigod primarch that struggles with day-to-day tasks, a dark Eldar scientist who used his groundbreaking technology in the most hilarious way possible, and a demon who on one hand is absolutely horrifying, but on the other, announces his presence in the most hilariously grimdark way possible. We're gonna talk about all of this and a whole lot more. But first I wanna give a quick shout out to this video's sponsor, and then we're gonna dive headfirst into the grimdark. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and allows you to play as more than 2,000 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships in dynamic combined arms PvP battles. Every single vehicle in this game is incredibly detailed and modeled down to their individual components, creating an insanely immersive combat experience. The game's collection of vehicles is frankly ridiculous, and spans over 100 years of development from the 1920s all the way up to the present day. War Thunder offers something for just about everybody. There's an arcade mode that reflects a more traditional modern gaming experience, with fast and action-packed PvP matches, while the realistic mode offers a more realistic and tactical experience for those of us out there who appreciate historically accurate battles. Whatever your playstyle, War Thunder has something for everyone. My favorite part about this game is seeing just how crazy it can get with land, air, and sea vehicles all coming together in the same match. War Thunder is available on PC, Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and the previous console generation. Click on the link in the description of this video to download the game for free today and receive a huge bonus pack including multiple premium vehicles, a premium account trial, boosters, and a whole lot more. Big thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Guilliman tells a joke. Let's kick this list off with a well-known character that is not normally known for their sense of humor, Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines. In fact, he normally gets a pretty bad rap for being a complete stick in the mud, a pencil-pushing tactician that is unnecessarily serious at all times. But believe it or not, Guilliman actually has a pretty strong sense of humor, even though we don't really get to see it very often. His jokes aren't traditionally hilarious, but if I'm being honest, coming from Guilliman, that just makes them that much funnier. This is a passage that comes from the short story Armor of Fate, and for context, it's right after Guilliman's resurrection. The wound that he had sustained from Fulgrim that landed him in stasis in the first place is pretty much just being held together by his armor. So he's been informed that if he was to ever take it off, his death would surely follow. He's getting used to life always having to wear his battle plate, and there are some growing pains associated with it. Sheaves of blueprints were scattered across the desk in front of him. He spotted something of interest written on one and reached for it, gritting his teeth against the purring of the suit. He always reached with his right hand. The integration points for the Hand of Dominion on his left made picking anything up nigh on impossible, even with the overgauntlet and his underslung bolter removed. Day-to-day tasks such as this were a struggle. His armored fingers pushed at slick plastic. Ceramite skidded across the papers, knocking them to the ground in wafting flutters.
"Oh, for the love of..."
he grumbled as he bent awkwardly to pick them up. The Armor of Fate was bulky, as its waist joint prevented him from flexing his spine and reaching the floor. He had to kneel. He reached for the scattered flimsies. Fingertips failed to grasp the sheets, sending them fleeing in small armadas over the polished floor. He growled in frustration, abandoned his task, and stood, drawing a curious look from Sicarius.
"I have the manual dexterity of a Legio Cybernetica battle automaton, created by the Lord of all mankind, master of the greatest armies in the Imperium, and I cannot pick up a plastic flimsy."
He glared at the offending articles.
"My greatest enemy."
There was a thoughtful quiet.
"You are joking, my lord?"
said Sicarius. Guilliman looked at Sicarius. He had to turn all the way around to do so. The pauldron's ornamental wings and large halo mounted on his back made it impossible for him to see over his shoulder. At least he had stopped knocking into things. There was that.
"By the throne, why am I expected to be serious at all times? Yes, Captain Sicarius, I am making light of my predicament. During the worst of the Great Crusade, I was known to make the occasional jest. Even after Terra fell, I did not spend my entire previous life writing deep thoughts into little notebooks, but sometimes dared to enjoy myself. I suppose that was not recorded in the hagiographies. Humor is not something you are renowned for, my lord. My time in the New Age has revealed that to me amply."
It's such a simple little moment, seeing a demigod primarch struggling to pick stuff up or having to spin all the way around to look at who he's talking to. But the fact that Guilliman can kinda joke about it adds a lot of depth to his character. It just makes him feel a lot more human. And also, surprisingly, it turns out he's pretty funny, which, like Sicarius said, is definitely something the primarch isn't known for. The self-proclaimed Dark Eldar genius. The next character on this list is one that we tragically don't really know that much about. His name is Vorsh, and he's a Dark Eldar crypto scientist. Now, most famous for his contributions to weaponizing the Shatter Shard, pieces of an ancient interdimensional portal known as the Mirror of Planes. Vorsh found a way to take these reflective shards of the portal and turn them into a weapon. The glass captures the target's reflection, and then when it's shattered, the individual would also burst into a billion pieces in a grotesque and gory explosion. Exactly the kind of thing that you would expect from a Dark Eldar scientist. Vorsh had, however, worked on a far more interesting personal project that he had dubbed photonic transubstantiation. He managed to transform himself into a living beam of light that was able to travel interstellar distances across the galaxy. What did Vorsh do with this incredible technology? Did he use it to better the lives of the Dark Eldar people? Did he contribute his knowledge to the production of new engines for their ships in order to aid in the Dark Eldar raids? No, he didn't do anything like that. Instead, he set off on a journey traveling across the stars, staying on each planet he came across just long enough to proclaim his genius to the people that lived there before blasting off to another world to do it again. He did this over and over and over for a period of multiple years, before eventually being captured by the Cabal of the Black Sun within a prism trap. And I want to paint the picture for you. Can you just imagine hanging out, sitting on the porch with some friends, on a cool spring evening, sipping lemonade, watching the fireflies, and all of a sudden, you see a blinding bright naked elf dude just go shooting past you across the sky, screaming,
"I'm the greatest motherfucker ever!"
I'm gonna be completely real with you, I don't even know how I would handle that, but I can certainly tell you that it would be the greatest moment of my entire life. So it's good to see that this guy managed to do some good with his technology. Fulgrim puts on a play. I'm gonna be honest with you, Fulgrim is one of my favorite primarchs. And I know that's something you don't hear from a lot of people, considering that for the most part, he is an awful, terrible person. But when I'm reading books that he's in, I find him weirdly hilarious. He's a dramatic, whiny, over-the-top narcissist, while simultaneously managing to be one of Warhammer's creepiest characters. If you've been watching my channel for a long time, you know that I love two things. One, spooky stuff, and two, corny, cartoonish villains. And he definitely fits this mold perfectly. What makes him really funny is when his super vain, narcissistic personality rubs up against somebody who is the complete opposite of him, and has no time for his foolishness. Much like the Lord of Iron himself, his brother Perturabo. There's a scene in the novel Angel Exterminatus where the Emperor's children suddenly and without warning arrive on the same planet as the Iron Warriors, and Fulgrim desperately wants to talk to his brother. He announces his presence in the most Fulgrim way possible, by arriving on a float, carried by a parade of debased and degenerate hedonites. Men and women with multiple arms, legs, and tits grafted all over their body, heralded by the stench of alien perfumes and rotting meat. The Iron Warriors that witness this parade are in complete shock, and when Fulgrim finally meets with his brother, Perturabo demands to know why he is here. Fulgrim is flighty and says that he shouldn't need a reason to talk to his beloved brother, especially the one that he was always the closest with. Perturabo reminds him that they are not even remotely close. And Fulgrim's like, oh yeah, you're right. He tells him that maybe one day the two of them will in fact be just as close as Fulgrim is with his brother Guilliman. And Perturabo points out that he's also not close with Guilliman either. And Fulgrim's like, oh yeah, that's true too, isn't it? Already, we're off to a great start. The basic gist of Fulgrim's visit is that he needs Perturabo's help in securing an ancient and powerful Eldari weapon, known as the Angel Exterminatus, that is said to be deep within the Eye of Terror. Early in the story, he doesn't really let on exactly what this thing is, other than it's incredibly powerful and important. Fulgrim is a man of theatrics, a vain narcissist that has gotten progressively worse since he begun his descent into Slaaneshi corruption. He can't simply tell Perturabo what this thing does. Oh no, that would be completely beneath him. Instead, he organizes a massive auditorium in which the Phoenician will tell the legend of the Angel Exterminatus to Perturabo, the Iron Warriors, and Fulgrim's grotesque carnival of mortal followers. He does this with all the theatrics and flowery language that you would expect, playing to the crowd like a monologuing Shakespearean thespian. The language he chooses to use in the performance continuously frustrates his brother, Despite this, when Perturabo looks around at the crowd, he sees that every single member of the auditorium is waiting on Fulgrim with bated breath, hanging on every word that he says. He doesn't understand how so many people could be so drawn in by Fulgrim's storytelling, especially when the facts of the story could be told in just a few sentences and it wouldn't waste anyone's time. Clearly, Perturabo is not a fan of theater. At one point during Fulgrim's performance, Perturabo suddenly interrupts him and demands to know what the Angel Exterminatus name actually means. Having grown sick and tired of waiting for Fulgrim to get to the point, Fulgrim pauses, and then suddenly spins around to stare bloody daggers directly at him. He has the angriest face you could possibly imagine, his noble and beautiful features twisted up in a look of pure hatred. The author points out that he looks to be milliseconds away from great and terrible violence. Fulgrim is in complete disbelief over the insolence and disrespect. He's sitting there like, this dirty I have to start the entire thing over from the beginning. Do you not understand pacing? Fun fact, Perturabo absolutely does not. Honestly, anytime these two characters interact with each other, it's absolutely golden. They could not be more polar opposites. Perturabo at his core is a fusion of logic, reason, and a very short temper, while Fulgrim is a vain drama queen. Later on in the Horus Heresy, after Fulgrim had fully ascended to demonhood, he basically just abandoned the entire crusade on Terra. He just left to go off into the realm of chaos. And why did he do this? Did he have some secret reason? Or is there something that he was looking for to help the war effort? Nah, by his own account, he had just gotten bored and felt there were far more interesting things out in the warp. It would take Lorgar tracking him down and binding him like he was any other demon to drag him back to participate in the siege of Terra. So, one of the most powerful beings in existence, one of the Emperor's sons, and arguably one of the most influential characters in all of Warhammer, basically just decided to fuck off. He was like, yeah, I totally understand that you guys are trying to do a thing, but I gotta be real with you, that sounds incredibly boring. I think I'd rather hang out here in this redwood forest of demon dicks and make out with a bunch of greater demons instead. He's such an unbelievable asshole, and I absolutely love him. The Night Lords ask for directions. Speaking of characters that are definitely not supposed to be funny, but weirdly end up absolutely hilarious, let's talk about the Night Lords of First Claw from the Night Lord trilogy by Aaron Dembski-Bowden. When you read these books, you end up getting really attached to them, even though, make no mistake, the Night Lords are absolute monsters. They do some truly awful things throughout the events of all three books, and by the third one in particular, when they reach Sanguelsa, the grimdark elements get kicked up into a completely different strata. In the sake of avoiding spoilers, I'll just say that there's a lot of skinning pits in that third book. Their members include their de facto leader, Talos, also known as the Soul Hunter, who receives prophetic visions in a very similar manner to that of their deceased primarch, Conrad Kurz. Sirian, who had a particularly dark gift that allowed him to feed on the fear of his victims, and thus pushed him further down a path towards Slaanesh. Uzos, a Night Lord who had given himself over to the worship of Khorne, and frequently took part in the mindless slaughter of crew members aboard their ship, a fact that didn't gain him any friends amongst the other Night Lords. And Zarl, one of Talos' oldest friends, and a Night Lord who fought with a double-handed chainsword. He was not a fan of the Chaos Gods in any respect, leading him to constantly butt heads with Uzaz. These are just a few members of the dark cast of characters that we get to meet in these books, and maybe I'll make a video in the future on all of them. The trilogy is littered with funny moments between all of these Night Lords that are juxtaposed to just how ruthless and brutal they really are. I read these books multiple years ago, so I'm a little fuzzy on all the details, but there was one scene that particularly stuck out to me and I remember it very clearly. The Night Lords had boarded an enemy ship, and one of them actually stops to ask for directions from one of their victims. A picture built up in his mind, a picture of the ship ahead and the horrendous damage it was taking as the War Master's fleet picked it apart, like a flock of vultures worrying a fresh corpse.
It seems,
He spoke calmly.
the gunnery decks between here and our pod are taking the brunt of fire from our fleet.
His bolter roared once, but the range was too short. The high-caliber shell pounded right through a running Imperial's chest and out his back, to explode against the wall beyond. Sirian chuckled as he saw.
What do we do?
Uzaz, more coherent now, asked as he laid about left and right with his combat blades.
Can we cross the suffering sections? Gravity is out. They are ablaze. No, we need to get back to the bridge. Close to it at least. Even getting to the pod will take too long. The ship's in pieces already, and the crew are swarming like ants in a kicked hive. Then we will kill our way there. Be silent, brother.
Talos told Uzaz.
The sheer number of lives we need to end is the main reason this will take too long. The gunnery deck must be in pieces by now, and these mortals are coming from there. How do you know? Uniform, Zarl.
Talos replied. Zarl, always one to need the proof of his own eyes, grabbed another human attempting to flee past. The man's uniform looked like every other, white and generic. What was Talos talking about? He lifted the struggling man off the ground by his greasy hair, holding the officer's yelling face close to his blood-stained faceplate. Through the Vox speakers in his helm's snarling mouth grill, Zarl's voice came out in an insane volume.
Tell me where you are stationed. Is it the gunnery deck?
The officer, quite deaf now, hurriedly drew a pistol in shaking hands and fired it point blank into Zarl's face. The small slug pinged against the ceramite, knocking Zarl's head back a little before ricocheting with a wet crack back into the man's own forehead. Zarl took one look at the deep red groove in the man's skull and dropped the corpse. Swearing in Nostraman, he could hear the bastard Syrian laughing over the Vox. Samus is here. Samus, that's the only name you'll hear. Samus, it means the end and the death. Samus, I am Samus. Samus is all around you. Samus is the man beside you. Samus will gnaw on your bones. Look out, Samus is here. The demon known as Samus is single-handedly the most terrifying and hilarious demon in the entirety of the Horus Heresy setting. Now, on paper, he is the embodiment of creeping dread, the primordial evil force that is constantly clawing at the back of your mind. He is the physical incarnation of death's inevitability. There is no escape from Samus. Now, that being said, the way Samus tends to show up in the stories is on one hand grotesque and horrific, but on the other, the funniest thing I've ever encountered in any Warhammer book. His manifestations follow a similar pattern every single time. He's this eldritch abomination that rips his way into our reality, normally in the most gory and over-the-top way possible, quite often involving possessing or exploding out of a recently deceased space marine. This monstrosity then runs rampant, slaughtering everything in his path, and is unquestionably an overwhelming and terrifying foe to be forced to confront. The comical way in which the authors make him talk and how he constantly says his own name and repeats the same lines makes him a little bit difficult to take seriously, and instead of him being this super scary threat, it just makes him hilarious to me. To illustrate this, I want to talk about two specific times that he managed to manifest during the Horus Heresy. Because on paper, the transformation that the individual undergoes in order for him to rip his way into our reality is absolutely grotesque and disturbing. But then it's completely undercut by Samus himself. In the novel Know No Fear, the Wordbearers have invaded the Ultramarines-held world of Calth, and one of the Wordbearers would end up getting captured by the Ultramarines during the siege. They keep him alive because they want to interrogate him later, but the Wordbearer just won't shut his mouth. He keeps taunting them, making fun of just how many people the Wordbearer's betrayal had led to an early grave. The thing that finally pushes them over the edge is when the Wordbearer insults their, quote, weakling primarch, laughing at how much of a coward Guilliman had been in the end, right before they killed him. And it's important to note that at this point in the story, the Ultramarines do believe that Guilliman has in fact perished. One of the Ultramarines named Solus is on him in an instant, his gladius tearing out and slashing the Wordbearer from hip to throat in a single ripping cut. The blade is embedded in the lower half of his jaw, and he's gurgling and laughing around it. This is exactly what the Wordbearer wanted, and he tells the Ultramarines that he knew one of them would have the balls. He then undergoes a horrifically grotesque and bloody transformation. His body ripping apart, his bones cracking and elongating, his face splitting apart the whole shebang. And then the massive demon known as Samus rips his way into the physical universe, using the Wordbearer's corpse as a portal. The last thing that we hear the Wordbearer say is spoken in his and Samus's voice. He says, "Samus is here," before the demon goes on an absolute rampage, tearing his way through the Ultramarines' fortress. The next time we would see Samus manifest during the Horus Heresy was in the novel The Vengeful Spirit. Now, during the book, Gavriel Loken, now a member of Malkador's Knights Errant, is tasked with leading a strike force to infiltrate the titular Vengeful Spirit. The strike team's job is to mark a path for a future assault force of Space Wolves, led by their primarch Leman Russ, in order to assassinate the War Master. The Knights Errant encounter what appears to be a cult-like ritual site in a space that originally had been dedicated to lodge meetings. Here they see Targost of the Sons of Horus conducting what appears to be a sacrificial ritual on a captured and drugged up Ultramarine. This cannot be allowed to pass, and Loken and his squad get the jump on Targost and his cultists. One of them fires a sniper shell directly into the back of his head, while the other Knights Errants jump out with their blades drawn and descend upon the cultists. After the slaughter is complete, they tend to the captured Ultramarine and notice a whole bunch of ritualistic carvings into his flesh. Targost was attempting to draw something out of the warp and place it in the captured Marine's body. Loken walks back over to Targost's corpse and examines it. The shell had detonated his head. There was pretty much nothing left but pulped meat, jagged skull shards, and brain matter. He says, "Too easy of an end for you." And right after he says that, the corpse lurched forward, sitting straight up, and what was left of his head said, "Samus is here," and punched right through one of the Knights Errant's chest. What followed was a ridiculous battle, where even while Samus was attempting to manifest, the corpse was just beating the crap out of all the Space Marines. At one point, one of them tried to tackle it, and it said that it was like trying to tackle the leg of a warlord titan. These are just two examples of how Samus tends to show up in the stories, and just based on the descriptions, if you haven't read them for yourself, you'd be like, there's really nothing funny about this. This guy seems horrifying. But it's the way in which he talks, how he always says the same thing over and over. Even when he doesn't physically manifest, he manages to be funny and creepy at the same time. There's a lot of smaller scenes with him throughout all of the other stories where somebody will just be on a Vox system and it's crackling and they don't really know what they're hearing, and somebody else will lean over to them and be like, "What are you hearing?" And he'll be like, "I have no idea, but who the hell is Samus?" Only for it to be revealed that his little monologue shtick is the only thing that's playing over the Vox. And when he does actually show up, this 30-foot tall demon always explodes out of a recently deceased body in a giant explosion of gore, saying "Samus is here" and doing jazz hands, before going on an absolute murderous rampage. He's by far my favorite demon in all of the Horus Heresy, and I really hope we're not done with him yet, and I hope he shows up in future books. There's not a single thing in Warhammer that is not made better to me than suddenly, "Look out! Samus is here! Jazz hands!" So that's my 5 instances of 40k characters who are not supposed to be funny being absolutely hilarious. Are you as big of a fan as Samus as I am, or do you think he's kinda dumb? What are some other characters from 40k that you find incredibly funny? Warhammer is the definition of a grimdark setting, so little bits of humor like that are pretty rare. So I'd love to hear from you guys if there's any other instances like this that you know about. And make sure to download War Thunder by using my link down in the description of this video to get an awesome welcome pack, which includes multiple premium vehicles, account boosters, and a whole lot more. It's free to play and has some of the most historically accurate PvP battles ever created. If you like content like this, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel, because I have so much more about 40k I want to tell you about. And if you want to be really cool, click on the notification bell, because that's pretty much the real subscribe button nowadays on YouTube. Apparently the algorithm doesn't actually put videos from the channels you're subscribed to into your feed unless you click on the bell, which is kind of stupid. And it's why you've seen so many channels recently really pushing for people to click on the notifications. But it is what it is. Thanks again for watching my video all the way through, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.